Grade 6 Science Unit 1, Water, Water Everywhere, Examining Properties of Water. The essential questions for the unit are, to what extent does the molecular structure of water affect its properties and behavior? How is life on Earth dependent on water? Some of the key unit vocabulary are 1. Solvent, 2. Solution, 3. Climate, 4. Physical weathering, 5. Chemical weathering, 6. Evaporation, 7. Precipitation, 8. Transpiration, 9. Phases of matter, 10. Condensation, 11. Specific heat, 12. Universal solvent, 13. Surface tension, 14. Polar molecules. Water has many unique properties. 1. Water molecules have a unique structure. 1 oxygen atom and 2 smaller hydrogen atoms bonded together. 2. Water molecules have a strong attraction, which is like the word sticky means cohesion. They stick together. So they have a strong attraction for each other, and this is called surface tension. This is why water has a tightness on its surface, why water bugs can walk on the water. 3. Water can dissolve many substances. Because water can get into chemical reactions with lots of substances, it's known as the universal solvent. 4. Water has a high specific heat, which means water can absorb a lot of heat energy without major changes, before major changes in temperature occur. Specific heat is sometimes also referred to as heat capacity, kind of the idea of how much water can it absorb, how much heat can it absorb. 5. Water expands when it freezes, which means that ice is less dense than liquid water, and that's why water can float on the top of a pond or in a glass. Water has a unique structure. Water is made of 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to 1 oxygen atom. Its chemical formula is H2O. Water molecules are polar. This means that each end of the water molecule has a charge. The oxygen end has a negative charge, and the hydrogen end has a positive charge. Opposite charges attract, so polar molecules cause water molecules to stick together. Again, that's the cohesiveness, cohesive. This is called surface tension. Surface tension is when the water molecules on the surface of water are pulled by molecules next to them due to the charged ends. So again, negative ends and positive ends attract. Surface tension helps insects skate on top of water, causes a tightness across the top of water's surface, and makes things like raindrops have a round shape because the molecules are holding on to each other. Another thing that's caused by surface tension is called capillary action. Surface tension causes capillary action, which is the upward movement of water. So water resists gravity to move upward, and that's how trees and plants are able to get water to the top and their top leaves. Water is known as the universal solvent. A mixture that forms with one substance dissolves another, which is called into a solution. The substance that does the dissolving, in this case water, is called the solvent. So water is the universal solvent. Water can dissolve many substances on Earth, and this is again why it's known as a universal solvent. Here's an example. So think about making fruit punch with a mix in the summertime. The solution is the fruit punch, and the solvent is the water, because that's what the mix got dissolved in. There are 2 types of weathering, physical weathering and chemical weathering, and weathering is related to water's unique property of being the universal solvent, which means that water can react chemically to a lot of different substances. Weathering is breaking down of rock and other substances. There are two types of weathering. Physical weathering, it's also called mechanical weathering. It means the same thing. Physical weathering occurs when rocks and other substances break into smaller pieces. The Grand Canyon was carved by running water. Water also breaks rocks apart due to freezing and thawing. Remember, water expands. So if there's a little crack in a rock and it gets in there and it freezes and expands, it'll push the rock apart eventually until it breaks. Water also breaks rocks apart due to freezing and thawing. Water expands, which means gets bigger when it freezes. The second type of weathering is chemical weathering. Chemical weathering occurs when water and other chemicals react to rock material, causing it to break down. So a lot of times acids dissolve in water and the water becomes slightly acidic, which increases the chemical reaction. Old gravestones are hard to read after years of chemical weathering. Water affects the climate. The average long-term temperature, precipitation, and weather in an area is called climate. So climate is temperature, precipitation, but it's long-term weather conditions. Large bodies of water, like big lakes or the ocean, are able to store heat. Again, that's because of water's property of specific heat or heat capacity, and they moderate, so they affect the climate. Water has a high specific heat. This means it takes water a long time to heat up and a long time to cool down. Water expands when it freezes. Unlike other substances, solid water, which is ice, is less dense than liquid water. And water is only a very unique substance because that's not typical for other chemicals. Usually, a solid is most dense, the liquid is the next dense, and then gases are the least dense. So this is the opposite switch for water. Water expands when it freezes. This is why ice floats in liquid water. Phases of matter. Water is the only substance on Earth that can easily exist in all three phases of matter. The phases or states of matter, so those words mean the same thing. Phases and states, they're the same thing. Of matter are solid, liquid, and gas. So for water, we've got ice, liquid water, and water vapor. We also are trying to learn about the water cycle. And here are the parts of the water cycle. So there's evaporation. This is when water gains heat energy, heats up, and changes to water vapor. So it goes from liquid to gas. Transpiration is also similar to evaporation, but transpiration is when plant leaves release water vapor. Again, they have little holes in their leaves called stomata, and those holes can release water if they need to. It also helps move nutrients and water up the plant as well. Parts of the water cycle also include condensation. This is when water vapor cools down, so gas cools to a liquid to form clouds. Clouds form on little tiny particles of dust and other particles. The water condenses on them to form the clouds. Precipitation can be in the form of rain, snow, sleet, and hail, and that's when the water or ice, depending on temperature, moves back to the Earth's surface. Water on the Earth's surface, so fresh water is very unique and rare. Notice oceans make up 97% of the water on Earth, and that's salt water. So there's 3% fresh water on Earth, and liquid fresh water is only about 1% of all the water on Earth's surface. Humans have many uses of water. Most of Earth's water is salt water, again 97%. Non-frozen fresh water makes up less than 1% of all the water on Earth. Water is essential for agriculture, which is growing crops. Crops watered by reliable irrigation systems are more productive and harvests are more dependable. So irrigation is watering farm crops. Water is an important resource used in power generation. This is called hydroelectric power. So hydroelectric power plants make the use of water's kinetic energy, which is moving water, so like in rivers, and the water flows through a turbine to produce electricity. Water is also heated up by power plants and turned into steam, and a lot of times the steam is used to power the turbines to generate electricity. So a lot of our electricity has to do with the use of water. Here's a picture of it. So again, the water moves through, turns a turbine, and the generating turbine produces the electricity we use in our homes. Again, used for agriculture. Crops are watered through irrigation. And in addition, another important point to make about water is its importance to public health. In the past, streams and rivers were often used to dispose of human waste, sewage, and open sewers were common. During the mid-1800s, public health officials recognized the connection between disease outbreaks and contamination of public wells and drinking water. So you can get sick if you're drinking contaminated water. Advances in water treatment and sanitary sewers have helped eliminate many diseases caused by human waste. Due to water's importance in power generation, agriculture, and human health, it's important to conserve water resources.